He moved through the airport halls the same way he always did, with quiet steps and a soft presence that most people never stopped to notice. Every morning before the sun came up, he arrived with his small lunch bag and the same worn jacket he had used for years. The airport at that hour felt half asleep, with only a few travelers wandering around, dragging their luggage behind them. While others rushed, he moved with steady patience, almost like he had learned long ago that life didn't need to be hurried. Most people only saw him with a mop or a broom in his hands. To them, he was simply the older worker who kept the floors shining. They walked past him without lifting their eyes, too busy checking flight numbers or complaining about delays. He didn't blame anyone for it. He had grown used to being overlooked. It was easier that way. It let him work in peace. He took pride in the small things others ignored. A spilled drink cleaned before someone slipped. A coffee cup picked up before it rolled under a seat. A child's lost toy found and placed gently at the help desk. He never expected praise. The airport was filled daily with thousands of people, all with their own lives, their own troubles, their own dreams. He understood that he was just part of the background for them. But there was one thing that always drew his attention, no matter how busy his shift became. Near the center of the terminal, tucked beside a cafe and a long row of seats, stood an old upright piano. It wasn't fancy. It had scratches on the side and a few keys that sounded slightly off when pressed. The airport had placed it there years ago for travelers to play if they wished. Some did. Most walked by without giving it a second look. But for him, the piano was different. Whenever he cleaned that part of the terminal, he would pause for a moment and look at it, almost the way someone looks at an old friend. He never touched it while people were around. He would only run the duster across it gently, as if he understood its value in a way others did not. His coworkers sometimes teased him playfully. They didn't know his past or the things he carried deep inside, but they noticed the way he slowed when he passed the piano. "Looks like you love that thing," one of them once said. He simply smiled and went back to cleaning, letting the comment drift away. He wasn't a talkative person. He did his work quietly, listening to the sounds of the airport. Rolling suitcases, flight announcements, soft chatter, and the occasional piano melody from a traveler who felt bold or bored enough to sit down and play. Some played well. Some played with enthusiasm but not much skill. He appreciated them all the same. There were times when he finished his shift late at night, and the airport felt calm, almost peaceful. That was when he wished he could sit at the piano just once and play the way he used to. But he always held back. He didn't want anyone to look at him differently. He didn't want questions or attention. His life had already taught him that dreams were not always meant to be chased forever. Some were meant to be kept inside, warm and quiet like a small flame that only the owner could see. Still, whenever he walked by, something inside him stirred. He remembered days long ago when music had been part of his life. A time when he could lose himself in the sound of the keys, letting his fingers speak for him when his voice couldn't. Those memories returned to him in soft flashes. A crowded room, warm lights, people listening closely, the feeling of being understood without saying a single word. But life changes. Circumstances shift. Responsibilities grow. One day he had to leave that world behind to take care of the people he loved. Work became about survival, not passion. The piano became something he admired from afar rather than touched. He told himself it was fine, that some people were meant to work quietly, to keep their gifts hidden. Even though he believed that, a small part of him still hoped for just one moment. One chance. One night when he could sit down when no one was nearby, press the keys gently, and let all the feelings he had carried for years flow out again. But the moment never seemed to come. There were always travelers wandering around, workers talking nearby, or security doing their rounds. So he stayed in his place, going from one end of the hall to the other with his cleaning cart, wiping down glass panels, emptying trash bins, and polishing floors. He wasn't unhappy. He had accepted his life long ago. There was a kind of peace in routines, a calmness in knowing what each day would bring. But sometimes, when he watched someone sit at the piano and play with ease, he felt a tiny tug in his chest. Not jealousy, never that. It was more like a quiet reminder of something he had once loved deeply. Travelers didn't know his story. They didn't know that he wasn't always just a worker in an airport. They didn't know he carried years of music in his hands, tucked away like a secret he had promised never to reveal. To them, he was simply the man who mopped the floors and made sure the bins never overflowed. There was one morning when he overheard a traveler complaining loudly near the seating area. Something about missing a flight, losing time, and the airport being too chaotic. The worker didn't judge. He understood frustration. He had lived long enough to know that people often carried storms inside them that others couldn't see. He simply cleaned around the area quietly, offering a small nod to show he heard the man's stress even if he couldn't fix it. He treated everyone the same, calmly, respectfully, without expecting anything back. Some passengers smiled at him. Some ignored him. Some barely noticed he existed. But he noticed them. He saw the nervous flyers gripping their boarding passes tightly. He saw tired families trying to keep children entertained. He saw excited travelers taking photos before their flights. And always, he saw the piano sitting quietly in the middle of everything, waiting for someone to bring it to life. Sometimes he wondered what would happen if he ever did sit down and play. Would people gather? Would they keep walking? Would someone stop and listen? He imagined the sound filling the open hall, mixing with the echoes and soft airport lights. He imagined, for just a moment, what it would feel like to be recognized for something more than the work he did each day. But then he would push the thought aside. It wasn't practical. It wasn't necessary. Life had taught him to be content with small joys and steady work. He didn't need anything more. Still, the universe has a strange way of revealing hidden things at the right time. And though he didn't know it yet, the day was coming when everything would change. A moment would arrive when the quiet worker no one noticed would surprise the world in a way he never could have predicted. For now, he simply moved through the airport like he always did. Steady, polite, unnoticed. But the piano waited. And deep inside, so did he. It was a slow night at the airport. Most of the travelers had already gone through security, and the remaining few wandered around tiredly, waiting for flights or staring at their phones. The usual buzz of the terminal had quieted to a soft hum. He moved through the hallways with his cleaning cart, picking up trash and wiping tables, just as he had done countless nights before. The fluorescent lights reflected off the shiny floors, and the air carried a faint scent of coffee and polished wood. For once, the terminal felt empty enough that he could take a small detour near the piano without worrying about anyone noticing. He paused for a moment, brushing dust off its wooden surface, his fingers lingering on the keys as if checking if they were ready. No one was watching. The thought made his heart beat a little faster. It had been years since he last played in public. Years since he had felt the music flow through him freely. He leaned on the piano, letting his hands rest lightly on the keys. The soft sound that came out surprised him, delicate and uncertain, yet comforting. It was a sound from the past, a sound that belonged to someone else yet felt like his own. He closed his eyes and imagined being somewhere else. In another time, when life was simpler and music was everything. A sudden cough behind him made him turn quickly. A traveler had stopped nearby, holding a boarding pass and a tired expression. The man had been walking past, but something about the sound of the keys had caught his attention. Instead of walking away, he leaned on his suitcase and watched silently. The janitor felt a rush of embarrassment. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he was just testing the keys, not really playing. But the traveler smiled softly and nodded as if to say, "Go on. I am listening." That small gesture was enough to give him courage. He sat down on the bench, adjusting his coat, and began to play one of the pieces he had carried in his memory for years. The first few notes were shaky. His fingers had grown stiff with time, and the keys felt different than they had in his youth. But as he continued, he relaxed, and the music began to flow more naturally. The notes were full of feeling, each one carrying a piece of his story, a fragment of the life he had lived quietly. He didn't notice other travelers slowly turning their heads, drawn by the melody. The terminal, once empty and quiet, began to fill with the soft sound of music that felt alive and real. He remembered moments from long ago, playing for small crowds, sitting alone at a piano in a dimly lit room. The way music had always been a companion, a friend, a voice for the thoughts he couldn't speak aloud. Every note told a story, and tonight, for the first time in a long while, he let that story breathe in front of someone else. The traveler had pulled out a phone and started recording quietly, careful not to interrupt. More passengers nearby stopped, curious about the music. Some had never seen anyone play with such emotion, especially someone they thought was only a janitor. Others simply paused, letting the sound wash over them, bringing a sense of calm and surprise in the middle of their late-night travel. He played without thinking of who was watching or what they would say. The music carried him away, a river flowing over stones, taking memories, regrets, hopes, and quiet joys along with it. He played pieces that reminded him of laughter from years ago, of moments of triumph, of nights spent learning and practicing until his fingers ached but his heart was full. As the music continued, the small audience grew. Travelers gathered around, some whispering, others just watching in awe. A few recorded videos, careful to capture the expression on his face as much as the sound from the piano. He didn't notice. He didn't need to. All that mattered was the music and the strange sense of freedom it gave him in a place that had always seemed ordinary and routine. Time lost meaning. The clock on the terminal wall ticked unnoticed. Announcements for departing flights came and went. People who had walked past before now lingered, drawn in by the unexpected beauty in the middle of their night. He saw smiles, some eyes glistening with tears, and children staring in wonder. In that moment, he realized music could connect people in a way words often could not. Eventually, he noticed his hands moving over the keys with a familiarity that surprised him. He had been away from real playing for so long that he had almost forgotten the joy it brought. Yet it was still there, hidden beneath years of quiet labor and routine. Every note was a small reminder that the person he had been, the life he had dreamed of, had not disappeared. It had simply been waiting for this moment. When he finally stopped, the terminal was filled with an unexpected silence. People looked at him in a way he had never experienced. Not as a janitor, not as someone ordinary, but as someone who had shared something extraordinary, even if only for a few minutes. The traveler who had first encouraged him gave a gentle clap, and soon, others followed, softly, respectfully, like they had witnessed something rare. He smiled quietly, feeling a warmth in his chest. It wasn't the recognition that mattered. It was the act of sharing something deeply personal, of letting the world hear a part of him he had kept hidden for so long. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not for the work he did every night, but for the person he truly was beneath it all. As people slowly went back to their routines, some whispering to each other, some returning to their phones or seats, the janitor gathered his things and continued his work. But something inside him had shifted. The piano, once a silent companion, had become a bridge to the world he had left behind. He knew he would return to it whenever he could, not for recognition, but for the simple human connection it allowed. That night marked a turning point. The airport, usually a place of hurried footsteps and tired faces, had become a space where something unexpected and beautiful had happened. And though he returned to his cleaning duties as if nothing had changed, the experience left a lingering sense of possibility. Perhaps ordinary nights could hold extraordinary moments if someone was willing to step forward quietly and let their hidden light shine. For him, the night wasn't about applause or fame. It was about remembering who he was and reclaiming a piece of himself he had almost forgotten. And though he didn't realize it yet, the recording made by the traveler would soon travel far beyond the quiet halls of the airport, carrying the story of the man no one noticed and the music that would touch countless lives. The next day at the airport felt different. People were whispering in corners, showing videos to each other on their phones, and looking toward the piano area with a sense of curiosity. Overnight, the small recording taken by a traveler had begun to spread on social media. The quiet janitor who had been overlooked for so long was suddenly appearing on timelines and feeds, surprising people who couldn't believe the emotion and skill they saw in someone they had always passed by without notice. He arrived early for his shift, carrying his usual lunch bag and wearing the same worn jacket. He moved through the halls, pushing his cleaning cart as if nothing had changed. But he felt a strange tension in the air. Travelers were whispering and pointing. Some were staring at him with recognition, a mixture of awe and disbelief in their eyes. He nodded politely, unsure of what to say, feeling a mix of nervousness and quiet pride. As he worked, his co-workers approached him carefully. One of them cleared their throat and asked, "Did you see this? It's you, right?" He looked at the screen of the phone being held out and saw the video. There he was, sitting at the piano the night before, completely absorbed in the music, fingers dancing over the keys with grace and emotion. His face was calm, yet alive in a way that contrasted with the quiet demeanor people saw at work. He smiled, a small, modest smile, not seeking praise. "Yes," he said quietly. "That was last night." News crews began arriving at the airport. Reporters wanted to interview the man who had captured hearts without intending to. Cameras were set up near the piano, and travelers began gathering, curious to witness the person behind the viral video. For the janitor, it was overwhelming. He had spent so many years in the background, unnoticed and content with his routine. Now, suddenly, the world was watching him in a way he had never imagined. Despite the attention, he continued his work, sweeping floors, wiping tables, emptying trash bins. But every so often, someone would approach, asking him to speak or to play again. He paused and played a short melody, simple yet heartfelt, just enough to show them the talent he had been keeping quiet for so long. The sound was met with gasps and murmurs of admiration. People could hardly believe that the quiet worker who had passed them each day was capable of such skill. Travelers who had watched the video commented on it repeatedly, sharing their thoughts on social media. "This is incredible," one person wrote. "I saw him cleaning the floor just yesterday, and now he's amazing at the piano." Others shared similar stories of moments in their lives when ordinary people had surprised them with extraordinary talent. The video ignited conversations about hidden potential and the importance of noticing the people around us. He moved through the airport with an odd sense of detachment. The fame did not change who he was. He was still the person who loved quiet, ordinary routines, the small gestures of care, and the comfort of predictable days. But he realized something important had shifted. The world now saw him for a different reason, and that recognition carried weight he wasn't used to. A few travelers approached to talk to him directly. They asked about his past, where he had learned to play, and what music meant to him. He hesitated at first, but then began to share bits of his life story. He spoke of times long ago when music had been a central part of his existence, before responsibilities and circumstances pulled him away. He explained how the piano had always been a friend, a silent companion in lonely moments. Each word was met with nods of understanding, and some listeners had tears in their eyes. He noticed that the airport staff began to treat him differently as well. Colleagues who had previously overlooked him now paused to smile, to ask how he was, to comment on the video. There was a new respect, a quiet acknowledgement that talent could exist in places no one expected. It felt strange, even a little uncomfortable, because he had never sought attention. But he appreciated the kindness and recognition in their faces. By midday, reporters had set up more formal interviews. Cameras followed him as he walked to the piano, where he played a few pieces for the crowd that had gathered. His hands moved fluidly, no longer hesitant, and the music carried the same depth and emotion as it had the night before. Children listened, wide-eyed. Adults paused, their routines momentarily forgotten. The airport, which had once been a place of passing strangers and hurried steps, became a space of shared experience, connected by the unexpected gift of music. The story spread beyond social media. Local news stations ran clips, and radio hosts discussed the man who had reminded the world that extraordinary talent could be found in the most ordinary places. People began to visit the airport specifically hoping to catch a glimpse of him playing. He noticed travelers smiling when they saw him, quietly grateful for the opportunity to share something that had been hidden for so long. Even as attention grew, he remained humble. He didn't ask for interviews, fame, or money. For him, the experience was about connection, the ability to touch others with something he loved and had carried quietly for years. The world's sudden focus on him was astonishing. yet he handled it with the same calmness that had defined him for so long. He understood that the attention was fleeting and that what mattered most was the impact he had in those small, real moments. Throughout the day, visitors left the terminal carrying stories and feelings they would remember long after their flights. They spoke of the janitor with awe, of how his music had brought calm and wonder into their lives. People began to reflect on their own assumptions about others, realizing that talent, kindness, and depth could be hidden beneath unassuming appearances. At the end of his shift, he returned to the quiet corners of the airport. The crowd had dispersed, the cameras gone, and the terminals returned to their usual hum. He wiped down tables and emptied bins as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet he felt a warmth that stayed with him, a quiet satisfaction that the music he loved had finally been heard by more than just himself. He paused once more at the piano, running his fingers lightly over the keys. The memory of the night before, the reactions of the travelers, and the unexpected attention all blended together. He smiled softly, knowing that while his life might return to ordinary routines tomorrow, the world had seen a glimpse of something special within him. The janitor who had always been overlooked had reminded everyone that extraordinary moments could come from the most ordinary places. And for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where those moments might not be so rare after all. By the following morning, the airport had transformed into a hub of excitement and curiosity. Travelers who had already seen the video online were now sharing it with others in person, pointing toward the piano area and whispering, "That's him. That's the janitor who plays like that." People who had never noticed him before were now stopping to observe him with new eyes. The quiet worker they had passed daily was suddenly at the center of attention. Reporters had returned, this time with more cameras and lights, eager to capture interviews and reactions from passengers who had witnessed the performance. They approached him carefully, aware that he was not accustomed to being in the spotlight. He nodded politely, answering their questions with modesty, never exaggerating his story. He spoke simply about his love for music and the joy it brought him. His words were honest and unassuming, a stark contrast to the buzz of excitement surrounding him. Passengers gathered, curious and amazed. Children peeked over their parents' shoulders, wide-eyed, and travelers whispered to one another about the unexpected talent they had encountered. Some had recorded the performance on their own devices, hoping to preserve the memory of seeing him play in person. The terminal, usually a place of hurried movements and brief exchanges, was now filled with a sense of community, shared by the unifying power of music. His co-workers, too, were struck by the change. Those who had once overlooked him now approached with smiles and respectful nods. They asked about the pieces he played and complimented his skill, expressing admiration for something they had never realized existed within him. It was a quiet revolution in the way he was perceived. People who had seen him as ordinary now recognized the extraordinary life that had quietly persisted alongside them. Social media continued to amplify the story. Posts shared across platforms brought attention from people far beyond the city. Comment sections filled with messages of wonder, encouragement, and amazement. "Who knew the janitor at the airport could play like that?" one comment read. Another said, "This is proof that hidden talent exists everywhere. We just have to notice it." The narrative of an ordinary man performing something extraordinary resonated deeply with people worldwide. He felt a mix of emotions. The attention was overwhelming, and he remained humble, focusing on his work even as cameras and crowds followed him. He did not seek fame or accolades. The joy he felt came from sharing his music, from seeing the reactions of those who listened, and from connecting, even briefly, with strangers who appreciated something he had kept close to his heart for so long. Travelers approached him, asking about his history with music. He spoke briefly of years spent learning, practicing, and performing in small venues before life had demanded other responsibilities. He shared memories of nights spent at the piano, of compositions written in quiet moments, and of the happiness music had always brought him. People listened intently, captivated by both the skill and the story behind it. The man who had spent so many years unseen now found his life resonating with countless others. The airport administration, initially unaware of the impact, recognized the significance of what had occurred. They arranged for a small area near the piano to be cordoned off so he could perform safely without disruption. A few chairs were placed for travelers who wished to listen, and announcements informed the public of the opportunity to experience the music firsthand. It became a space where ordinary work and extraordinary talent intersected. The story of the janitor began to appear on local and national news. Interviews showcased not just the performance, but also the humility and humanity of the man who had touched so many lives. People began to reflect on their own assumptions and biases, realizing how often extraordinary qualities can be hidden in plain sight. His performance became more than a viral video. It became a lesson in seeing beyond the surface, in recognizing the potential in everyone, no matter how ordinary they may appear. Travelers who had witnessed the event shared their stories with friends and family, recounting the unexpected emotion and beauty in the performance. Many expressed gratitude for the reminder that simple acts, done with passion and sincerity, can leave lasting impressions. The airport became more than a place of transit. It became a venue of inspiration, where moments of connection and wonder could emerge spontaneously. Amid the excitement, he remained grounded. He continued to arrive early, carry his cleaning supplies, and attend to the duties that had been his routine for years. Yet, there was a quiet pride in his heart. He understood that he had sparked something meaningful, not through words or intentions, but simply by doing what he loved and allowing it to be seen. He saw the joy in the faces of listeners, the smiles of travelers, and the acknowledgement from colleagues, and he knew that the impact of those moments extended far beyond the airport walls. The janitor also noticed the deeper effect his performance had on the people around him. Children asked questions about the piano and music, and some expressed a desire to learn. Adults reflected on missed opportunities and unpursued passions, inspired to reconsider their own lives. Even the busiest travelers paused for a moment, captivated by the simple power of music to connect hearts and minds. In this way, the music became more than sound. It became a bridge between lives, a gentle reminder of the human capacity for wonder and creativity. As the days passed, invitations began to arrive from organizations, music enthusiasts, and media outlets who wanted to hear him play again. Yet he remained cautious, aware of the fragile balance between sharing his gift and preserving the quiet life he cherished. He played when the moment felt right, allowing the music to remain authentic, personal, and heartfelt, rather than turning it into a performance driven by external expectations. He found that the recognition did not change who he was. It simply illuminated a part of his life that had always existed quietly, waiting for a moment to be seen. The airport, once a place of routine labor, had become a stage where hidden talent could shine, where small acts could inspire others, and where ordinary people could become extraordinary in the eyes of those who paused to notice. The janitor's story traveled far beyond the terminal. Social media posts, news articles, and word of mouth carried the tale of an overlooked worker whose music touched hearts everywhere. People shared the story to remind themselves and others that the world is full of unseen talent and potential, waiting for a moment to emerge. And through it all, he remained humble, focused on the simple joys of his work and the occasional quiet pleasure of playing music that had been with him for a lifetime. In those moments, he realized that recognition was fleeting, but the impact of authenticity, kindness, and passion was lasting. The world had seen him, not just as a janitor, but as a human being capable of extraordinary expression. And though the cameras, social media, and crowds would eventually move on, the change he had sparked in the hearts of those who listened would remain, a quiet testament to the power of talent, humility, and the courage to share what lies within. Days turned into weeks, but the janitor continued his work as usual, arriving early, cleaning the halls, and quietly observing the piano whenever he passed. Yet now something had changed. Travelers, co-workers, and even the airport staff looked at him differently. There was a respect in their eyes, a recognition of something extraordinary hidden beneath a simple, unassuming life. And though he never sought attention, he found a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his music had reached the hearts of many. Invitations began to arrive. Organizations wanted him to perform, local music schools offered opportunities, and even a few media outlets asked for interviews and feature stories. Yet he approached each invitation with care, mindful of the life he loved and the routines that grounded him. Fame was not his goal. The music itself had always been the reward, the way it could connect him to others, and he did not want that connection to be lost in the chaos of public attention. Still, he allowed himself small moments of sharing. He played brief pieces for travelers during slow periods, letting the music flow naturally without concern for who was watching. People paused, some recording, some simply listening, and the atmosphere of the terminal shifted subtly each time he played. His music became a small but constant reminder that beauty could be found anywhere, even in the middle of a busy airport. The airport itself embraced the change. The administration arranged a small, dedicated area near the piano for him to play when he wished, without disrupting operations. Chairs were placed for those who wanted to listen, and travelers often stopped just to watch him perform for a few moments. It became a quiet haven in the midst of travel, a place where ordinary life and extraordinary talent intersected. He found joy not only in the act of playing but also in the reactions of those around him. Children would point excitedly to the piano, asking their parents if they could listen. Travelers paused, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles of wonder. Even co-workers who had once overlooked him now spoke to him with curiosity and respect, asking about the pieces he played and the stories behind them. Each interaction reminded him that simple acts, performed with sincerity and skill, could resonate deeply with others. Over time, the attention from the wider world continued to grow, though he remained grounded. He realized that recognition was not about fame but about connection. It was the way his music could lift spirits, calm anxieties, and bring people together for a brief, shared experience. That understanding gave him a sense of purpose, a quiet assurance that his life, his talent, and his choices mattered in ways he had never anticipated. He also began to reflect on his own journey. Years ago, he had set aside his dreams to meet responsibilities and challenges. Music had become a private sanctuary, a companion in quiet moments, rather than a public pursuit. Now, seeing how the music could touch lives, he felt a renewed sense of fulfillment. The world had not only witnessed his talent but had also been reminded that even ordinary lives could contain extraordinary gifts. In these moments, he recognized the subtle but profound impact of humility and authenticity. He had never played to impress, never sought recognition, never cared about applause. And yet, by remaining true to himself, by allowing his passion to emerge naturally, he had created moments of wonder and inspiration for countless people. It was a lesson in the quiet power of sincerity, a reminder that the most meaningful actions often come without fanfare or expectation. He continued to arrive at the airport daily, maintaining his work while cherishing the piano as a bridge between his inner life and the world around him. Travelers shared stories of their experiences, expressing gratitude for the unexpected moments of beauty they had encountered. Some shared that the music had helped them through stressful travel days, while others spoke of the inspiration it gave them to pursue their own forgotten dreams. Each story strengthened his sense of purpose, reinforcing the idea that small acts of authenticity could ripple far beyond their immediate surroundings. As weeks passed, he grew more comfortable with the attention. He accepted interviews occasionally, always speaking with honesty and humility, sharing the joy of music without seeking personal glory. He remained the same quiet, steady worker, yet now he carried a new sense of possibility and confidence. He understood that life could offer unexpected opportunities, and that embracing them with grace and modesty could create lasting impact. The airport, too, embraced the transformation. It became known not just as a place of travel, but as a place where beauty and humanity could emerge spontaneously. Travelers began to linger longer, appreciating the small joys of music and connection. Staff members took pride in being part of a terminal that had witnessed something remarkable, and the presence of the piano and the man who played it became a symbol of hope and inspiration for all who passed through. Despite the attention and admiration, he remained grounded in his routine, understanding that the true value of his talent lay not in public recognition but in the moments of quiet connection it created. He played when he felt moved, for those who wished to listen, without seeking accolades or fame. Each note carried the essence of his journey, the struggles, joys, and quiet perseverance that had defined his life. Over time, his story inspired others in unexpected ways. People began to look more closely at those around them, realizing that everyone carries hidden talents, stories, and depths that may never be immediately visible. His example became a reminder that recognition and opportunity could be found in everyday places, that extraordinary moments often emerged from ordinary lives, and that the simple act of sharing one's passion could transform not only the self but the lives of others. And so, he continued his work, his music, and his quiet presence at the airport. Travelers would stop, listen, and sometimes record videos, but he played not for them, not for the attention, but because it was who he was. His story, now known widely, remained a testament to the power of authenticity, humility, and the courage to embrace one's own gifts, no matter how ordinary life may seem. The janitor who had once been overlooked had become a symbol of inspiration, reminding the world that extraordinary lives often exist quietly alongside the ordinary, waiting for a moment to shine.